Herod the Great. He ruled over Judea when Jesus was born. To this day, he is reviled as the evil king who tried to kill the Christ child in the slaughter of the innocents.
Herod was furious, and he gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years and under. Matthew 2:16.
Yet, there is another side to this mad king.
Herod the Great was the greatest builder in the history of the country. To this very day, the city of Jerusalem bears his stamp.
Herod left behind magnificent monuments that still dazzle the eye 2,000 years later. But the secret to one of his greatest achievements lies hidden beneath the sea. Who was Herod the Great? A murderous madman, a brilliant king, or both? These are but a few of the mysteries of the Bible. A shimmering ribbon of shifting sand stretches across the coast of Israel from Haifa to Tel Aviv. Powerful winds blow in from the west. Strong currents make the waters treacherous. No present-day engineer would choose this exposed and rugged shore as the site for a harbor. But 2,000 years ago, a great king created a splendid port city here and made this place a crossroads of the ancient world. The centuries have worn away the splendor that once was. Yet these ruins still astonish us with their sheer magnitude. This was Caesarea Maritima, a city rich in history. Here stood the headquarters of the Roman governor, Pontius Pilate, notorious for condemning Christ to death. The apostles Peter and Paul preached here. One of the first Christian communities was founded in this place. For decades, archaeologists have sifted through the remains of this great city.
That's a nice one, too.
Yet its ruins still hold many mysteries. Caesarea was named for Caesar Augustus, first emperor of Rome. But no Roman built this city. 2 decades before the birth of Christ, Caesarea was founded by Herod the Great, king of Judea. Why did he choose such an exposed coastline to build a major harbor?
Herod purposely chose a place that was not suited for a city, so that Herod could show his greatness, because Herod conquered nature herself. Nature did not make this a place for a city. Herod did.
Caesarea was the crowning achievement of Herod's 34-year reign. Even today, the city's spectacular remains bear witness to the pride and ambition of their creator. Just as Herod conquered nature at Caesarea, he also conquered destiny. For Herod, of all men, should never have been king.
Herod was really, on the one hand, a person of great ability, on the other hand, a very strange, in fact, sick person. In terms of his ability, he was like the consummate politician. At the same time, he gradually turned his people against him, mostly because of what a maniac he was. He killed his own children and his wives, always out of fear that somebody was about to take over power from him.
Nearly everything we know of Herod's life comes from a Jewish historian named Josephus, who lived a century after Herod's death. Josephus compiled a biography of the king as part of a lengthy history of the Jewish people. It was this account that first revealed Herod's surprising origins. Herod's father hailed from Idumea, a district south of Jerusalem, conquered by the Jews and forced to convert to Judaism about a century before Herod's birth. His mother's people in the eastern kingdom of Nabatea built the rose-colored city of Petra. She was an Arab princess. Was Herod considered a Jew?
The question sounds simple, but in reality it's very complicated and depends in large part on whom you ask. So if you did not like Herod the Great, then you called him a half-Jew. You might even have called him a non-Jew.
Herod's mixed blood should have forever banned him from the throne of Judea. But world events in the century before Christ would favor his rise to power. At the time of Herod's birth, in 73 before the Common Era, the crown of Judea belongs to the dynasty of the Hasmoneans. A century earlier, this royal Jewish family had led the Maccabean revolt to overthrow Egyptian invaders and restore the country to Jewish rule. But in 63 BCE, the armies of Rome invade Judea. The once independent Jewish state surrenders to Rome. Herod's father, prime minister to the Hasmonean king, encourages a policy of befriending the invaders. The Roman governors reward him with wealth and power. Young Herod receives a classical education steeped in Latin and Greek culture. When Herod is just 25, he is appointed governor of Galilee, a fertile district north of Jerusalem. Here, he might have lived a privileged, if quiet, life as a civil servant of the Romans. But soon, a young Hasmonean nobleman seizes control of Jerusalem, overthrowing Roman rule. He is proclaimed King of the Jews. As a friend of the Romans, Herod knows his days in power are numbered. He flees Galilee and makes a bold move.
Herod is eventually in a position where he begins to lose power, and he decides that he's going to go to Rome and convince the Senate that making him king of the Jews is the solution to all of their problems.
In the dead of winter, Herod sets sail for Rome, seat of the greatest world power of his day and key to his success. Here, Herod seeks out his father's longtime friend and ally, statesman Mark Antony. Antony agrees to plead Herod's case before the Senate.
Now, the Romans didn't care about the genealogy of the Hasmonean dynasty. The Romans cared about who could best run the affairs of the kingdom of Judea. Judea was important. It was the main crossroads of the ancient world. Herod had talent. He was by far the smartest one around.
And so, in 40 BCE, the Roman Senate bestows the crown of Judea upon Herod. In gratitude, the new king of the Jews accompanies his Roman patrons to a temple on Capitoline Hill, where, according to legend, Rome itself was founded.
It seems to me the defining moment in Herod's career was when he ascended the Capitoline Hill with Mark Antony and Octavian to offer sacrifice to the gods of Rome. This connected Herod with bonds that would not be broken to Rome and to Roman patrons. And this defined for me his entire career.
With Rome's blessing, Herod returns to Judea to depose the Hasmonean king, whose anti-Roman policies have spread throughout the country. A brutal war between Herod's armies and Jewish forces will last nearly 3 years. Finally, with the help of Roman troops, Herod captures Jerusalem against the wishes of the very people he aims to rule.
Now the Jews that were enclosed within the walls of the city fought against Herod with great alacrity and zeal, for the whole nation was gathered together. Josephus, the Book of Antiquities.
As Herod enters Jerusalem triumphant, the Hasmonean king is sent to Rome to be executed. Now, Herod sits upon the throne. He is 36 years old and his enemies are many. How will he secure his hold on power?
Herod was an outsider in Judean society. What does an outsider do when he becomes an insider? You kill off all those connected with the old regime, all those whose claim to power is greater than yours, all those who might cause you trouble. You kill them, you send them off into exile, and you create a new aristocracy whose power is indebted entirely to you.
Some 15 miles northeast of Jerusalem, in a barren stretch of desert, lies one of the lowest spots on earth, Jericho. Situated in a valley almost 1,000 feet below sea level, Jericho is also one of the driest spots on earth. But a nearby spring turns the surrounding terrain into a green oasis, long renowned as an agricultural center. Jericho is no less remarkable for the archaeological remains that have come to light here. In the 1950s, excavations revealed the remains of a city nearly 10,000 years old, perhaps the oldest on Earth. And nearby, archaeologists have also uncovered the ruins of a palace, built and enjoyed by the Hasmonean kings during their century-long reign over Judea. When Herod becomes king, he acquires this residence and adds his own distinctive flourishes. A Roman bath, in keeping with his classical upbringing and eclectic tastes, and a lavish, enormous swimming pool. In this very spot, some 2,000 years ago, Herod would commit the first of many murders of his own family members. What mad drive for power could bring a king to kill his own kin? By Jewish law, the only legitimate heirs to the throne are the remaining members of the Hasmonean family. But Herod turns enemy into kin. He repudiates his first wife and marries a Hasmonean princess, Mariamne, granddaughter of the former king, impeccable in pedigree. Herod falls in love.
The Mariamne story is a real soap opera. It has a heroine. We assume she's very beautiful. We have a husband who's passionately in love with her. We have jealousy, we have intrigue, we have sex. We have everything we need for a wonderful story. Unfortunately, it's a tragedy.
Loyal to her family, Queen Mariamne pleads with Herod to bestow a prestigious honor upon her young brother, Aristobulus. At her request, Herod appoints this young man high priest of the temple in Jerusalem. Little does Mariamne know that she has sealed her brother's doom. Aristobulus is perhaps the youngest high priest the people of Jerusalem have ever seen. But when he officiates at the temple, their reaction is overwhelming.
For when this youth, Aristobulus, who was now in his 17th year of his age, went up to the altar, the people at once rejoiced. Josephus, the Book of Antiquities.
In Aristobulus, the Jews see not just the high priest, but the legitimate Hasmonean heir to the throne. Herod sees only a dangerous rival.
And Herod the Great, in his craziness and in his jealousy, saw the youth decked out in his ceremonial robes, saw the adoration which the people of Jerusalem had given to this comely youth now come back from his education abroad, saw that this young man was going to be a serious threat to him because the people loved him as they would never love the Mad King.
Herod hatches a murderous plot. On a warm summer day, the court of King Herod enjoys a feast at the palace in Jericho. As the afternoon wears on, guests cool themselves in the large swimming pool. Herod encourages his young brother-in-law, Aristobulus, to enjoy the waters, where unseen danger awaits him.
With darkness coming on, while Aristobulus swam, some of the king's friends who had been given orders to do so kept pressing the young man down and holding him underwater as if in sport, and they did not let him up until they had quite drowned him. Josephus, the Book of Antiquities.
Mariamne knows only too well her brother's death was no accident.
Mariamne, I think, never forgave Herod that. That poisoned, as I imagine at least, the relationship from then on. And Mariamne and Herod had a very stormy, very unsatisfactory, unhappy marriage.
Mariamne makes no attempt to contain her disgust for her husband. Such open contempt sends Herod into fits of rage.
Herod the Great was so madly in love with her that he was unable to think clearly. He was unable to reason. She, in her part, seems to have enjoyed goading him, since, after all, she was a proud Hasmonean princess. And who was Herod? Just a lowly Idumean.
Word of the queen's behavior spreads quickly, and Mariamne becomes an obvious target for palace intrigue.
On a couple of occasions when Herod left, there were rumors that Mariamne had had an affair with the person that Herod had left in charge, which of course created an impossible position.
Herod's mother and sister have long resented Mariamne's haughty bearing. Now they produce evidence against the queen. Mariamne is brought to trial for adultery and high treason. Whether she was indeed guilty remains a mystery. Only the outcome is clear. Herod makes a fatal decision and orders the execution of his beloved, the flower of Judea, who gave him 2 sons. As she dies, Herod descends into a living hell.
He would frequently lament for her and call for her as if she was still alive. He had an inflammation upon him and a madness in his head. Josephus, the Book of Antiquities.
Herod succumbs to a deep depression and abandons affairs of state, but only briefly. His endless ambition drives him on. He soon finds cause to order the execution of Mariamne's mother, and eventually nearly every male with Hasmonean blood in his veins. To produce his own heirs to the throne, Herod will take 8 more wives during his lifetime, though polygamy violates Jewish law. More than anything, Herod dreams of immortal glory. Now he sets out to make an impression that will last an eternity. To Jews around the world, there is no holier site than this, the western wall of the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Here prayers are offered, tears are shed, and dead are remembered. These monumental stones are all that remain of the original Temple Mount, built some 2,000 years ago by Herod the Great.
In all the things which Herod the Great built in the land of Israel, the most extraordinary of all these buildings was the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. It is, to this day, the largest religious structure ever made by one man in the history of the world.
Here, the last holy temple in the history of Jerusalem once rose toward the heavens. Here, a young Jesus once listened to the priests. Here, he cast out the money changers in a rare display of anger. And here, Christ made a fateful prediction.
Some of his disciples were remarking how the temple was adorned with beautiful stones. But Jesus said, "As for what you see here, the time will come when not one stone will be left on another. Every one of them will be thrown down." Luke 21.
History would eventually confirm Christ's dire prophecy, but a great mystery would remain locked in these stones. Why did Herod, with his mixed blood and scant respect for Jewish law, build the most lavish holy temple Jerusalem had ever seen? For 5 long centuries, this temple has been worn by the footsteps of worshippers. By the time Herod becomes king, the Holy Temple shows the ravages of time.
Herod the Great realized that a great king in a great city, in a great kingdom, needed a temple that was larger, more grandiose, more impressive than that. And he set out to build a temple that, in fact, would become a tourist attraction, a temple of which both he and his subjects would be proud.
When the king announces his plans to rebuild the holy structure, his Jewish subjects are fearful. Could this simply be a ruse to get rid of their beloved temple?
The Jews of Jerusalem didn't want the king messing around with their holy temple at all, but they couldn't very well stop him. The story is that they wouldn't let him take away the old structure until he had completed the new structure around it.
Herod promises he will not begin building until all the raw materials for the new temple are assembled. Preparations alone will take over 2 years. Still, there remain serious religious concerns. According to Jewish law, only priests may set foot in the inner sanctum. How can common workers rebuild the temple without defiling the sacred site?
Herod trained a whole group of priests as carpenters and as masons and with all the necessary trades so that they could build the central holy place. He rebuilt the temple in Jerusalem in such a way that it never ceased offering sacrifice to the God of Israel for a single day.
The temple itself was built by the priests in a year and 6 months, upon which all the people were full of joy. Josephus, the Book of Antiquities.
With its facade of white marble, the temple shines like a snowy mountain in the sun. Precious gold adorns its entrance. Herod also enlarges the platform that supports the temple complex to a vast expanse of over 35 acres. Massive retaining walls are built of stones weighing 60 to 80 tons, so perfectly fitted that no mortar is used. Such expertise is still visible in the western wall of the Temple Mount. Herod's temple was one of many important cultural landmarks occurring around the world during the 1st century BCE. The Celts in Northern Ireland built a huge wooden fort called Navan as a ceremonial center. In China, court astronomers beat special bronze mirrors to ward off the evil spirits believed to appear during solar eclipses. And in Peru, master weavers produced some of the finest textiles in the Americas. In Judea, word of Herod's splendid temple attracts thousands of pilgrims to Jerusalem.
The Jewish reaction to the temple that Herod built, whether they hated him or not, was enormously positive, was overwhelmingly positive. It's very clear from the gospel stories that this temple was absolutely central to the Jewish people and the Jewish faith. They loved it. They came from all over the country to be present for the great pilgrimage festivals.
The Temple Mount alone would have secured Herod a place in history, but he continues to build as if driven by an obsession.
It was important for the kings to make huge monuments to themselves. The theory being that the monument lives after the king is dead, and if you want to ensure your own immortality, then you build something big that everybody will remember. I suppose every king must feel sort of like this. Just Herod did it.
It is the year 22 BCE when Herod embarks on a monumental project that will occupy a decade of his life. He will build an entire city from the ground up. Herod's great achievement will be called Caesarea Maritima, in honor of the Roman Emperor Caesar Augustus.
There's a suggestion in the accounts of Josephus that there was a little bit of rivalry between Augustus, the emperor, and Herod the Great. They all were great builders. It said of Augustus, for example, that when he came to power, Rome was a city of brick and he left it a city of marble. Well, Herod, I think, caught that sort of vision.
Herod aims to impress the emperor by overcoming nature herself and creating an entirely man-made harbor on this exposed coastline. According to Josephus, Herod began by building 2 monumental breakwaters. But how did Herod's workers maneuver these huge stones? Such technological feats seem far beyond the capabilities of engineers in the 1st century BCE. Then, in the 1980s, a team of archaeologists from Israel, the United States, and Canada solves this mystery. The largest blocks in the breakwater are not stone at all. They are made of hydraulic concrete, a kind of concrete that pours and hardens underwater. The Romans had invented hydraulic concrete a century earlier when they discovered that a special mortar made of lime and volcanic ash hardens when it comes in contact with water. But the Middle East had never seen such technology.
Herod imported the use of hydraulic concrete. It was nothing new in Italy, but it was totally unknown in this part of the world when Herod built his harbor. The archaeologists probably have learned more about the technology of using hydraulic concrete for harbor construction here than in any other site in the Mediterranean.
How did Herod's engineers work with hydraulic concrete? Archaeologists have reconstructed a likely scenario.
They built what we call single-use barges. Now, these are wooden barges that were built on or near the shore and were towed into position, then filled with hydraulic concrete so that the weight of the concrete caused them to sink to the sea floor.
2,000 years later, remnants of the barge's wooden frames are still embedded in the concrete or have left their impression there. Completed in a mere 13 years, Caesarea sparkles upon the shore, a thriving port city dominated by a dazzling temple to Augustus and Rome. Warehouses along the shore house goods en route to and from Rome and the East. An aqueduct supplies fresh water from springs fully 9 miles distant. Not an inch of the vast waterway is open to the elements. City residents enjoy performances in a theater that seats 3,500. Caesarea is the crowning achievement of Herod the Great's ambition, completed in the king's 63rd year. Herod's nation, though subject to Roman rule, is prosperous and at peace. But this will be no golden age for the king.
A melancholy solitude rendered the kingdom quite the opposite from that happy state it was formerly in. Herod's own life was entirely disturbed because he could trust no one. Josephus, The Book of Antiquities.
More and more, Herod retreats to the isolated palace fortresses he has built in the remote wilderness outside Jerusalem. Of these, Masada epitomizes his sense of style. Here, an exquisite palace built in 3 terraces seems to hang from the sheer cliffs. Mosaics, frescoes, and Roman baths provide all the pleasures of refined civilization in the midst of a savage desert. But this palace also reveals another side of Herod.
There is something of the aesthete about Herod. He enjoyed beautiful places. He enjoyed entertaining his friends in remarkable settings. There's also a lot of paranoia visible in these buildings. Herod obviously needed places he could take himself and his family if his enemies overtook him, as they constantly threatened to do.
To protect his throne, Herod has murdered courtiers, priests, even his beloved wife. Now, near the end of his life, Herod may face the ultimate threat to his reign. In a place called Bethlehem, a new king of the Jews is born in a manger. This rival's name is Jesus. Near the end of the reign of Herod the Great, a momentous event takes place within his realm. A child is born in Bethlehem.
Today, in the town of David, a Savior has been born to you. He is Christ the Lord. Luke 2:10.
Word of Christ's birth spreads quickly, attracting foreigners to Judea.
After Jesus was born in Bethlehem during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews?" When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed. Matthew 2:3.
According to the Bible, Herod summons the wise men and entreats them to find the child so that he too might honor him. But the king is lying. His real intentions are unveiled after the Magi find the Holy Family and Joseph has an alarming dream.
An angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph. "Get up," he said, "take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt, for Herod is going to search for the child to kill him." Matthew 2:13.
The Holy Family flees, and the Magi never return to Herod. the king will commit an act of horror unparalleled in the New Testament.
When Herod realized that he had been outwitted by the Magi, he was furious and gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years and under. Matthew 2:16.
The Bible's account is the only telling of what has come to be known as the slaughter of the innocents. Even Josephus, in his detailed biography of Herod, makes no mention of this crime. Is it possible the atrocity never occurred?
My own guess is that the account is a legend more than history. My guess is that Herod didn't know that Jesus had been born and had no reason to try to find him and to get rid of him.
Perhaps Herod's reputation as a cold-blooded executioner helped make the story believable.
Herod the Great was paranoid. Herod the Great did kill off his opponents. Herod the Great was afraid of rival claimants to the throne. Those elements are true, and those elements, I think, are the building blocks of the story.
The suspicions that have tormented Herod throughout his life accompany him into old age. He has married 10 times. Now, half a dozen sons jostle for succession. 2 adult sons by his beloved Mariamne, Alexander and Aristobulus, would seem to be the heirs apparent to the throne with their royal Hasmonean blood. But they treat their father with equal parts of hatred and fear.
They obviously did not like Herod. They were, of course, profoundly opposed to his execution of their mother many years earlier. And there seems to have been a mutual hostility between Herod and these 2 children, even though they offered the best hope for an orderly and peaceful succession to Herod after he died.
Like their mother, Mariamne's sons become the targets of palace intrigue. Soon, a half-brother with his own designs upon the throne accuses them of treason. Their claims of innocence remain in doubt to this day.
It's not completely clear that these 2 sons are completely innocent. That is, they may well have been plotting to take over power, or at least to try to have their father pushed aside so that they would be able to become kings in his stead.
Herod testifies against his own sons in a hasty trial which finds them guilty. By the king's order, they are summarily strangled.
The execution of Aristobulus and Alexander means that Herod the Great has personally, systematically wiped out all the remnants of the Hasmonean family.
Now at last, the bloody cycle of fear and suspicion must end. Now at last, it is Herod's time to die. Soon, he retreats to his palace at Jericho, ravaged by a swarm of diseases.
There was a gentle fever upon him, an intolerable itching all over the surface of his body, continual pains in his colon, and tumors about his feet, an inflammation of the abdomen, and a putrefaction of his private member that produced worms. Josephus, The Jewish Wars.
Herod knows he is dying and orders that preparations be made for a grand funeral at a place called Herodium. Here, 8 miles south of Jerusalem, Herod had accomplished yet another engineering feat. He had reshaped an entire mountain. Within its summit, he built an unusual circular palace. The luxurious living quarters included a Roman-style bath and garden courtyard once stocked with exotic plants. In life, Herod has made of Herodium a pleasure palace. In death, he will make it his tomb. Even on his deathbed, Herod retains an iron grip on power. He orders the execution of his eldest son, already imprisoned for treason.
He was never too sick to secure his kingdom. And in the end, he ordered the arrest of the noble men, of the important men of every village in Judea, with instructions that when he, Herod, were to die, they would kill the lot of them, so that the people of Judea who wouldn't mourn his death would have something to mourn about.
Only days after issuing this dreadful command to kill thousands of noblemen, Herod dies. His final order is mercifully ignored, and the men are released. All Judea rejoices. It is the year 4 BCE. According to Josephus, Herod's remaining family mounts a funeral procession worthy of a great king. They carry his body to Herodium and bury him there. But Herod's tomb eludes us to this very day.
Scholars and archaeologists have been looking for Herod's tomb for 100 years. And very intensively in the last 10 or 15 years, they have not found the tomb of Herod the Great, despite everything that can be done technologically to look for it. Why not? That remains one of the great mysteries of the extraordinary life of this extraordinary king.
Herod left behind a string of ineffective heirs. Less than 70 years after his death, a Jewish uprising brings down the wrath of the Roman Empire. The city of Jerusalem is reduced to unspeakable ruin. The magnificent temple is destroyed. Only the western wall of the Temple Mount remains, a sacred site to this day. Today, these monumental stones of Herod's Temple Mount bespeak a powerful king. The ancient texts preserve his name in faded ink.
He combined Roman politics, Greek culture, Eastern savagery, and Jewish sensitivity in a way which makes it almost impossible to grasp what this man must have been like. It can't be that he was simply crazy, because he wasn't. He was an enormously vigorous, effective, intelligent, active ruler. He left fantastic buildings in a campaign which has never been equaled in the whole history of the country. And yet, in the end, the heart of his being remains mysterious. In the end, the man was greater than our attempt to get a handle on him.
Perhaps Josephus best describes the enduring enigma that was Herod the Great.
He was a man of great barbarity to all, and a slave to his passions. Yet he was favored by fortune as much as any man ever was, for from a private man he became a king. Josephus, the Book of Antiquities.